Afternoon guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. Thought I would shoot a video today to answer a couple questions I've had lately on Facebook as well as YouTube on how to care for your tools in the woods. One of the things that I want to talk about real quick with you before we start this video is, what makes a good knife. And, I carry a Pathfinder knife. That doesn't make it any better or any worse than any other knife just because it's the knife that I carry and I designed. But it has the design features that you need for a good survival knife or a good one tool type option. And I wanted to explain those to you because you can get custom manufacturers and other people to make you a good knife, but there's certain features that you want to make sure you have. The first feature that you want in a knife is you want this thing to be 4.5 to 5 inches in blade length. And the reason for that is most of the material that you're going to process in a short-term survival situation or self-reliant situation is going to be something around the 4-inch diameter. Is going to be the biggest log you're going to want to process or split down or cut. And if your blade's not longer than the log is in diameter, then when you go to baton through it, you're not going to have anything sticking out. So once you get this buried in the log, you have nothing to hit against except your handle. Okay, and you don't want to do that. So you want to be out here on the edge of this blade. So that's why I say bigger than 4 inches, maybe 5, 5.25, up to 6. Okay, anything smaller than 4 inches is not going to give you what you need in a chopping tool or a batoning tool. Anything longer than 6 inches really becomes a little bit more unwieldy and it's hard to do fine carving tasks with. If I carry a large knife like that in a jungle situation like a machete or a bigger tool of some sort, I've always got a smaller knife to back that up. The other thing that's very important with the knife is that it's high carbon steel. The reason you want it to be high carbon steel is so that in an emergency situation you can find a rock with a hardness of 7 or above, like quartz, flint, chert, things like that, and strike sparks off of this blade onto char cloth to affect fire if you have to. The third thing that I think is very important is that this knife is full tang. In other words, the knife is made out of one solid piece of metal with the handles bolted to it. That's a full tang knife. That's very important because if you're going to baton the back of this knife or you're going to be very rough with it, you don't want it to break. Rat tail knives, rat tail tang style knives, which means they just have a small piece of metal that's inserted into the handle, sometimes capped off on the end like in the case of a K-bar, will break given the right circumstances. Same thing with Morris, so you have to be careful with that. The last thing that's very important with a survival knife of any kind is that it's not coated, number one, in any way, shape, or form. If the knife is coated, you're going to have to use the blade to strike sparks off of a ferrocerium rod. Or you're going to have to use some type of secondary tool that comes with the ferrocerium rod, like a hacksaw blade or a striker. If you want to be able to use your knife and just carry a raw ferrocerium rod, you need a good 90-degree solid spine on this thing, not beveled over, a good solid shelf on there with a sharp spine, and it cannot be coated in any way. Those are the things that I think make a good survival knife. Now, one of the things that, a good friend of mine named Abram Elias told me, and I really kind of took this to heart, and I thought about it, and it makes a lot of sense. And what he said was, he said that you sharpen your knife one time, and you hone your knife forever. And that makes a lot of sense because every time you have to sharpen your knife, you're removing material. Every time you remove material, you are expending a resource. So you want to keep this knife good and sharp, which is why it needs to be high quality. Same thing with the rest of your tools. And then you just want to hone it every once in a while. Okay, so what I do is I carry 2 tools with me most of the time for 2 sharpening tools for all the tools that I carry. The first one is I carry a small Baco file, okay, and it has 2 different grits on it, and this is good for things like your axe, okay. This would be a rough sharpening tool for something you put a nick in it, or you did something heavy-duty damage to it, or you used it for quite a long time without sharpening it. This is a sharpening type tool, okay, but it doesn't weigh much, so I can afford to carry it. The second thing I carry is a Lansky's diamond rod that's retractable. It folds out and screws in. All right, it has a diamond rod inside the sleeve that you can screw down the thing and it doesn't go back in on you. And then it has a set of carbide sharpeners on the back side. Now, in and of themselves, these carbide sharpeners aren't worth a whole lot as far as I'm concerned for anything. But if you have a multi-tool that's not going to have the highest quality blades on it anyway, it's very good for sharpening your multi-tool blades, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about this diamond rod, okay? This diamond rod does 99% of all the sharpening that I do to my tools in the field, okay? It's very simple. You can feel it bite into the metal. You know when you've got the right angle, and that's what's important, is to maintain the right angle when you're sharpening, okay? And you just want to push it up onto the blade just like that. You'll feel it bite in just a couple strokes each direction. And I've done it so much that I pretty much can do it, you know, with my eyes closed. I know what it feels like. The good thing about these is a lot of people will tell you never to sharpen towards your blade. And the reason they say that is so you don't cut your finger open. But this diamond rod, because it has a sleeve on it, if I were to go up into that, I'm going to hit that sleeve before I'm going to hit my finger. And that makes it ideal for me, because I like to sharpen toward my blade a little bit sometimes, just to knock the over bevel off of it. When you sharpen on this side, you're going to roll a bevel over when you do that. By turning this over and sharpening toward the blade on the other side, you're going to knock that bevel off, okay? So that's the way I sharpen my knife. Very short, easy strokes. I'm not even pushing down on it hardly at all. All I'm doing is honing this knife. I'm honing the edge. And I can feel when I'm biting, and I can feel when I'm not biting into it, so I know when I've got the right angle and when I don't. It doesn't take much to keep a razor edge on a knife. Alright? As far as my axe goes, I always carry a Wetterling's axe. What do I think makes a good axe? Any hand-forged axe with a wooden handle in it is a pretty good axe. Okay? Anything else is inferior. You want to make sure you can replace this handle in a wilderness environment if you have to. If it's plastic or fiberglass, you're not going to be able to replace it. So you always want a wood handle. You always want that high carbon steel forged head. Again, you can strike sparks off of it if you have to, but it's going to hold a good edge for a long time. Same thing with the diamond rod. If it's really dull, I'll use the file first, then I'll use the diamond rod. But I keep my axe really, really sharp. So I really don't have to do much other than stroke it with that diamond rod, and I can hear it. I know when I've got the right angle, just like with the knife. It doesn't take near as much finesse as people think it does. You just got to find the right angle, feel when you're biting into the steel, and that's all it really takes. And I keep my axe just about as sharp as my knife. This thing would definitely, absolutely skin a fish and probably shave your arm. Alright, so let's talk about multi-tools for a minute. Multi-tools, I've said this before. You know, multi-tools come down to the tools themselves and the quality, okay? Leatherman is the best. As far as I'm concerned, bar none, Leatherman is the best. Unfortunately, Leatherman quit making the Leatherman core, and I think that's the best multi-tool that was ever made. The reason I think it's the best is because it has most of the things on it you need and not very much that you don't, okay? What I think you need in a wilderness environment is a good file. This one has a double-sided file. I think you need a decent knife. It does have a good, straight, non-serrated, small pocket knife type blade that you can use for fine skinning and things like that. On the other side, it has a good, flexible, high carbon steel saw for cutting fine notches. And also, this makes a great striker for your Ferricium rod if you don't have a good, sharp 90-degree spine on your knife. It has this serrated blade on it as well, which I'm not real fond of, but the good thing about having this diamond rod is it fits right into those serrations. So I can sharpen this serrated blade for the most part with this diamond rod, and I couldn't do that with a stone because it sits right into the serrations. Okay, serrated knives aren't worth much to me in a survival situation. They're more for cutting rope and strap, things like that. It's not a must-have. The one thing that's a must-have on here, on any multi-tool, is a good awl, okay? A good awl with a hole in it so that you can drill holes if you have to, sew if you have to, and things of that nature. So if you've got an awl, a file, a good sharp knife blade, a decent saw, and a good pair of pliers, you've got a good multi-tool. But all of those tools need to be quality, and for me, you know, Leatherman is the best quality out there. Now, let's go back to this multi-tool for just a minute. We talked about sharpening with those carbide sharpeners. This multi-tool is the only thing I'd use those carbide sharpeners for, but since they're there and they're part of the tool, it makes it easy. I can just set this thing down on the stump, flat. It's got a flat edge on the back of it. Take my knife and pull it through the carbide sharpeners, and it will keep this smaller pocket style knife really, really sharp, where I'm not worried about having the finest edge in the world, but at the same time, I'm only going to use this for processing food, maybe fine carving like birds or small fish, but it puts a razor sharp edge on that thing in no time at all with those carbide sharpeners. So it's really good for that. So with these two simple tools of, this Baco type file that I have here, and this Lansky's retractable diamond rod, I have everything I need to keep all the tools that I carry sharp and honed in the field, and it doesn't take up hardly any room in my pack, and that's what's important to me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this short video on, some of the ins and outs of tools and sharpening. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School, and I'll be back with you on the next video. Thank you very much.